All right, a few days ago, Obama came out with a op-ed in a paper in Arizona about gun control, and since I've made a lot of gun control videos, I thought about responding, and then I decided not to. But then I just watched a video of the Young Turks about Obama's stance on the issue, and although I believe that they're correct when they say that Obama is has no principle and only does things that he thinks are very popular. They basically mouth every fallacy possible when it comes to the gun control issue. Couple big things. One, they start off by saying that 2,000 some odd number of people have died from gun violence in the United States since Tucson. And then she specified as being not just gun violence, but they were, quote, shot with a gun. I would imagine at least half of those are suicides. I mean, if they were homicides, they would have said homicides. And of those homicides, probably 75% are related to the drug war. And none of those are going to be affected by background checks at Jay's Sporting Good or Bass Pro Shops or Cabela's. So that's number one. The other thing is they went through a poll about Americans' support for gun control. And they drum up the very old misnomer of the so-called gun show loophole. There is no gun show loophole. When you go to a gun show, there'll be sellers there, and some of those sellers are going to be from federally licensed dealers, and some of them are going to be private sellers. All right, when you buy a gun from a federally licensed dealership, there is a background check. It doesn't matter if you do it in their shop or at a gun show. So it's not like you go to a gun show and every gun you get, it's off the books. No. If you go to a private seller, then it is off the books. But you can go to a private seller not at a gun show and have it be off the books. And it is completely absurd to imagine that there is any law that could possibly enforce this. Any estimate of the number of guns in the United States would make that impossible. The other big thing about background checks is there's no evidence that they reduce crime. The Brady background checks, when they were instituted in 1994, it's unclear that they've saved even one life. You'll hear large numbers of prosecutions, but the prosecutions are for people who were false positives. You know, if there's a felon with your name and you go into a gun store and try and buy a gun, you will fail the background check very likely. Not because you're a felon, but because someone with your name is a felon. And that's going to count. When you hear these, you'll hear like, oh, 65,000 felons were prevented from that. That's where almost all of those come from, are false positives. When it comes to actual prosecutions, in the entire, 15, 16 years since they've had the background checks, they've only prosecuted a couple hundred people. Most of them are acquitted, and the few that are convicted, they aren't violent felons. They aren't murderers who were in a gun store attempting to get a gun to commit their next crime. It's always been people who had a felony from 40 years ago. Probably they got in a bar fight or something relatively minor. They probably, in most cases, didn't even realize that they were a restricted purchaser. And they go and they get flagged. That's the majority. That's almost all of them where prosecutions even result, which is very few of them. There's no evidence that the background checks have reduced any kind of crime at all. They just cost a lot of money and serve as a potential basis for a registration. Some people allege that they actually are registration. I would say that even if they are, they're extremely it's extremely partial at this point. The other thing is, if you own property, you have every right to exchange that property. And so the idea that you should have to ask permission is absurd. Now, the other thing that they have a real hard time imagining is they say that they're aghast because only 67% of Americans think that people on the terrorist watch list should be prohibited from owning guns. Now, they take this for granted, but the principle here is that you're punishing people without any due process of law. You can't just say, well, I think you might be a terrorist, so you're prohibited from flying, you're prohibited from flying a plane. If someone is guilty of a crime, then they should be charged and evidence brought against them, and they should be given their day in court. Prior to that, then there can be no punishment against them. And in the interview, in the show, the guy, I forget his name, Senk, is that his name? He says, well, people. He says he would be against the terrorist watch list just being used on everybody, and yet there's 1 million people on it right now that we know of. I can guarantee there are not 1 million Al-Qaeda in the United States. It's been shown that all kinds of people who are not in any way even remotely dangerous are on this list. I mean, it's the evidence that the FBI has put people on the list simply to coerce them. Or they have the wrong name. I've heard of 5-year-old kids who are on the list. So the list is actually not something that really identifies people who are about to commit a terrorist act at all. I mean, there's 1 million of them, so I guess hypothetically there's a chance that some of them happen to be that way. But if they're actually going to commit a crime, then they should be charged. All right, you shouldn't just create a list and prevent people. It's completely extrajudicial. You can't punish people. You can't curb their liberties because you think they might do something. And the thing is the government. It's not just that they are abusing that that watch list horribly. So I'm definitely against prohibiting people who are on the watch list. I'm against the watch list anyway. So it's not it's such a no-brainer that they would say. And, you know, I was thinking about this the other day. As they point out, it doesn't look like Obama's going very strong on this, and I don't think he will either. And part of the reason is that there's not a lot of incentive. You know, when the government passes something like the healthcare bill, even though it's contentious, over the years a constituency is going to develop of people who depend on that healthcare bill, people who get benefits from it. That constituency is going to support the politicians who support those policies, like Social Security and Medicare, and all the other, you know, all the programs the government institute. You know, they are designed to basically buy votes. The thing with gun control is it doesn't really buy any votes. Telling people that they can't buy a gun is not going to make them your constituents ever. So you can piss a lot of people off and you can lose an election, and who knows, even worse, but you won't get somebody who's going to vote for you in the next campaign. So that's a big disincentive for moving forward in it. In fact, I would argue that the only real incentive that they have is the more authoritarian one, which I think is the ultimate motive of a lot of these people. Oh, and then the other real common fallacy that they just put out there is that the gun lobby, aka the NRA, is basically just a front for gun manufacturers, and that actually Americans favor gun control, and it's just this conspiracy of the NRA and arms manufacturers, and the NRA promotes guns so that the sales go up for gun manufacturers and vice versa, and then they give money to the NRA. Okay, this is like this really weird conspiracy theory the Brady campaign has put out. They even have charts to show it, and it's just absurd. It is true that they give money to the NRA, but the NRA has millions of dues-paying members and millions of active supporters, as do the other pro-gun organizations. That is the source of their strength. That is the reason that they are powerful, because there is grassroots support for them, not because there's some special interest that is promoting them. And this is in stark contrast to the gun control lobby, which does not have very much, if any, grassroots support, and is largely funded by special interests, especially the government itself, and then the organizations tied to the government, such as the labor unions for your police officers, or you know, the Guild of Mayors, or whatever other political guilds out there that derive power and influence from gun control laws. That it's amazing to me that they can say all these, and then they say outright lies. He says that no shootings have been stopped by gun use. That's excluding the Appalachian School of Law. That's excluding the really famous case of the mass shooting at one of those big, huge churches out in Colorado where an armed woman actually killed the assailant. There's actually, I think it's about a quarter of all mass shootings are stopped by civilians with guns, but leave it to them not to realize that. So I just thought I'd get it out there. All right, that's it.